We belong to a God, the creator of everything. Hi everybody, welcome back to NoPro Worship. My name is David Wesley. Last week's video was an introduction to a little mini-series on the acoustic guitar and how it can be used in a worship team. I was going through some of the strengths and weaknesses of the guitar, and I actually neglected a very important one, and that is if you lose your pick inside the body of your guitar, good luck getting it out. It'll take you forever. Actually, that's not it. What I wanted to talk about that I forgot last week was tuning, and this is actually a pretty complicated subject that deserves a video of its own, so here we are. So my guitar has 6 strings, some acoustic guitars have 12, and when they're not tuned properly, it can sound really awful. So in this week's video, I want to discuss some of the issues that can affect tuning and some methods for tuning, and briefly go over some alternate tunings that you can use to add a little bit of extra color to your guitar playing. The first factor that will affect the tuning of your guitar is temperature, and there is simply no way around this. This guitar was down here in my cool basement studio for about 6 days, and when I picked it up to play, it was wickedly out of tune. I have my 2 hot studio lights and a little bit of body temperature. It took me about 10 minutes to get this thing to a stable condition that I could tune it and it would stay tuned. Now imagine that you're taking your guitar to church, you're throwing it into the trunk of your car, in the winter maybe. When you get to church, the thing is very cold and it takes an even longer time to warm up. You want to make sure that you warm up your guitar to playing temperature, which is room temperature, plus your body heat, plus whatever lights may be on the stage before you tune. Otherwise, you're just going to be tuning again and again and again. So it's really important for guitar players to show up early, give your instrument a chance to warm up, sit on the stage, drink your coffee, and then tune. Don't waste your time. So the next thing that will affect the tuning of your guitar is the age and condition of the strings themselves. So as time goes by and you're playing a lot, you'll actually experience stretching of the strings. They lose a lot of that tensile strength and they actually get corroded from the sweat and the oil of your hands. So that's why it's really important to wipe down your strings with a cloth when you're finished playing. And I'll be the first to admit that I am terrible at remembering to do this. Now, the tuning changes can be really subtle at the start. You might be able to tune the guitar fine on the open strings, but as you do certain chords, you'll find that you just can't get them in tune no matter what you try. And eventually, the thing just can't be tuned, and it's time for new strings, hopefully before you get to that point. Once you do put on new strings, it's important to remember that they need to stretch. Any little imperfections in the winding on the pegs there need to be worked out. So put on new strings a couple days before you need to play at a practice, at a service, at a performance, and play them a lot to get the strings stretched out. Otherwise, you could be going out of tune between songs. All right, your guitar is all warmed up and it's time to tune. There's a few ways we can do this, and let's start with self-tuning. The way this works is that you start with your low E string. It doesn't matter if that one's in tune per se, as long as you're in tune with yourself. So you hit your low E and you fret up to the 5th fret so that you can try to find what the next string, the A string, should sound like. And you make adjustments to the A string until they match. And then you go up to the D string, the G string. When you get to the B string, you actually go to the 4th fret. And then back to the 5th fret when you're going to the high E. Now, some of the problems with the self-tuning is that you won't necessarily be in tune with anybody else that you're playing with, especially an instrument like a piano that is already tuned and won't be changed. The other thing is that unless you have a very good ear, once you get from the bottom to the top, you could find that your high E and your low E actually don't match up, and you're going to have to go back and make some fine adjustments. The reason why this is that when you fret up to the 5th fret there, you're not actually getting an exactly in tune A. It's going to be slightly sharp, and as your strings age, it's going to be less and less reliable a method of tuning. The second tuning method I like to call reference tuning, because you're using another instrument as your reference. This means that you can tune to and play with another instrument and not just by yourself. The best way to do this is with an electronic keyboard because number one, it'll always be in tune, but number two, you can switch away to various sounds other than a plain piano sound that might be easier on the ear and easier to tune the guitar to. So basically, you get somebody to play the corresponding notes on the keyboard for each of the strings, and you have to listen very closely and adjust until you hear them match up. The third tuning method is electronic tuning. All this means is having a digital device that provides you visual feedback to tell you whether or not your string is in tune, and you don't have to rely just on your ear. Now, digital tuners have got a lot smaller in size over the last few years. Usually they had to be held on a music stand nearby, but the little Snark device that I have right here clips right onto the end of my guitar. All I have to do is hit a string. It gives me a great big letter telling me what the note is, and a very visual indicator tells me whether I'm flat, sharp, or right on the money. So I just do this for all 6 of my strings and I'm good to go. Now this particular one is fantastic because you can set it to microphone mode, so it just listens to the sound through a small microphone on the device. Or what I normally use is vibration mode. So it's clipped to the neck of the guitar and it feels the vibration of the body of the guitar and can get the frequency from that. And this is great because you can tune in a loud room and it doesn't affect it at all. Other tuners you might find built into the electronic pickup of the guitar, so no external devices required. Other ones you might find in a pedal format, so you have to plug in through a 1/4-inch cable. It sits nicely on the floor there, powered by a 9-volt battery or AC/DC adapter. You just click it to mute the output to the soundboard and it engages the tuner. Again, you get that visual feedback for each of the strings, and then you turn the tuner off and your sound goes back to the soundboard. If you check the description for this video, you'll find a couple of links to tuning devices that I think you might enjoy, and if you purchase these using the links I give you, my channel gets a little bit of a commission, so that'll help me out quite a fair bit. Okay, so your guitar is warm and you've tuned each of the strings individually, except you're going to have to play the strings together. And regardless of whatever tuning method you've chosen, you've tuned the strings in the open position. The second that you put fingers down, things are going to go flat, they're going to go sharp. The true art of playing and tuning the guitar is compromise. It's about knowing the material you're going to be playing and trying to make the guitar sound as good as it can under those circumstances. So when you're making fine adjustments to the tuning, especially after electronic tuning where theoretically everything should be great, it's really important that you don't try to make one particular chord sound good. I could try to do some fine adjustments to make that E chord just sound perfect, and then I try to do a G chord and it sounds totally awful. So in your own learning, you're going to find what works for you. You may discover that your B string needs to be like 1% flat if you're playing in such and such a key. These are the things that I can't teach you. It's trial and error, and it's knowing what songs are ahead of you. If you're doing an entire set in the key of E, that's probably going to be super easy for you. Now, it's also important to remember if you're going to be playing in a set with other people in the context of a worship team, you may need to be capoing. And every time you go up with your capo, you actually can get a bit sharp. So you may want to consider actually tuning in the position that your capo is going to be, especially if you know you're going to be capoed for the whole service. All right, just when you thought that tuning a guitar couldn't get more complicated, there's more. We only talked about standard tuning, which is your E, A, D, G, B, E, but in reality, you could take any of these 6 strings and you can tune them up or down in many combinations and turn this into a completely different animal. One person that's great at this is Chris Martin from the band Coldplay. If you were to go to one of their concerts, backstage you would see any number of guitars maintained by a guitar technician who tunes them and hands them off appropriately for the right song. And these guitars would be different alternate tunings that might be used just for one song. There's other techniques that you can use. For example, you could put a capo across just 5 of the 6 strings. That changes the shape of the chords. There are also people that customize their capos by making little holes in the rubber so that some of the strings in the middle aren't capoed, and you can use multiple capos together. It can get very complicated very quickly, but the people that do them, they recognize that this is how they get the best sound that they can out of the guitar. So let me just show you a couple examples from my videos where I use alternate tunings. So thanks for sticking with me as we took this brief look into the wide world of guitar tuning. You know, I first picked up this instrument because I wanted to learn how to lead guitar players more effectively. And back then I thought guitar tuning was very straightforward. Turns out I was wrong. I make these videos because I believe that God's people deserve leaders that grow, and they're made possible by my patrons on Patreon. If you're interested in supporting this ministry, you can visit my Patreon page at patreon.com/DavidWesley. And I will see you next Friday as we delve into playing the guitar in the wonderful key of G.